Hi, I'm Michael Georgiopoulos. I'm the interim dean of the College of Engineering and Computer Science. And I would like to welcome all of you today in the NSF Career Panel discussion that we are holding on behalf of the young faculty at the University of Central Florida. This is a project that is co-sponsored by the National Science Foundation iCubed project and the Office of Research and Commercialization. NSF iCubed has as one of its major goals to bring together faculty that have common interests. And I think we have accomplished that by bringing you in here in today's panel discussion. We brought in some of our NSF current and past career awardees to talk to you about their experiences. And obviously, we brought in some young assistant professors who are interested in pursuing NSF career proposals. One of the things that I want to remind you is that at the end of the discussion, panel discussion, we are going to have our assessment coordinator, Bonnie Swang, or her assistant, Swan, distribute some forms that we would like you to fill out. This is important for our NSF project, and it gives us some good idea of whether we have accomplished the goal of this particular NSF panel discussion. Without further ado, I want to introduce to you our moderator today is Vaidyanathan. He has been involved in the NSF Career panel, in the NSF Career proposals extensively in his time at UCF, and he has mentored a number of you in the past, and he is willing to mentor a lot more in the near future. So, Vaidi, thank you for providing the moderation for this panel.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming. Without you, none of these things are useful. So we have a fantastic set of people here who will explain to you a little bit about the career proposal. They've all been very successful. For you, there are a couple of things that are takeaway from this process. Number one, the NSF Career is probably the best proposal you will ever write in your life. In terms of money, in terms of longevity, and in terms of your career, this is very important. You have chosen to become faculty members. You got to focus on what research you're doing and what kind of teaching you're going to do. This gives you a fantastic opportunity to think through this entire thing. The second thing is our office and all the people here are here to help you through the process. This is a process. And as you go through the process, you will learn more and more, not only about writing proposals, but also dealing with all other things. So let me start off by asking the panelists to introduce themselves in a very, very short 2 or 3 minute thing, their background, when they got their NSF Career Award, and what they're doing in their research.
Okay, so my name is Haiyan Hu. I'm from computer science in ECS department. I got a career last year, 2012. My topic is computational framework for epigenetic gene regulation. Okay.
My name is Hojun Sohn from biology. I'm third year assistant professor, and I just got my career grant starting from February this year. And the topic of my research is to figure out why locusts swarm. Yeah, that's what I do.
Hello, my name is Yongho. I'm a professor of material science and engineering. I guess I'm not so young compared to the panel members here, but I did get I started at UCF starting January 2001. On Christmas Eve of 2002, I received an email from National Science Foundation that I got this career award. So I had the career award and grant from 2003 to 2008. I basically, through this career award, was able to establish a pretty good laboratory on what I would term it as diffusion in metals. Essentially, what I study is how atoms jump and move about in a piece of metal, essentially. And it's quite useful for understanding of how structure behaves in any of the materials that we use, including your soda cans, too, by the way.
Good afternoon. I'm Bobby Jeanpierre. I'm in the College of Education, and I'm a science educator. I got my career award in 2005, so it ended in 2010. My research focused on looking at how teachers in urban settings implement inquiry science in their classrooms. And I've continued to produce publications on that research because it was a longitudinal case studies. And if anyone's familiar with qualitative research, it can be in abundance. So it was very rewarding.
Good afternoon. My name is Steve Kuebler. I'm a faculty member in chemistry and the College of Optics. This year I'm also working in Office of Research in a temporary position. And my career grant was awarded in 2008, and it pertained to exploring a laser-based method for making microscale photonic structures. So these are devices we might use for next-generation internet and optical computing and so forth.
Hello, my name is Saiful Khondaker. I'm an associate professor of nanoscience, physics, and electrical engineering. I got my career award in 2008. It's going to finish next year with an extension. It's about fabricating or parallel fabrication of single electron transistor. It's a quantum devices. And my research in general has to do with understanding the electrical properties and fabrication of devices using nanomaterials. So getting a career award was really helpful in establishing my research and subsequent award that I got.
Thank you very much. I have a set of scripted questions. These questions were actually assembled by several people. These are the regular questions that you would normally ask when you start writing a career proposal. But before I start, I just want to give them a couple of minutes each to go and tell you how their career proposal writing experience was, because that is what you're going to look at. Could you tell us how your career writing proposal was and what kind of help that you received?
Okay, so I think, so I never really think about the process, but recently I summarized it. I think it's my experience contains 3 steps. So the first step is I have to understand what is the career proposal. So actually, I have the chance to the second year. I went to got the chance to be a reviewer at NSF. So essentially, I understand what is this career proposal. And then I still don't understand the education, the whole thing. So big help is come from VD. VD really helped me to understand what is the educational part. So I will say that is the first step, understand this concept. So what is the career proposal? What is the educational activity you need to write? And then the second step will be you have to really write the proposal. So it's really neat. You think about this 5-year plan, so it's a little bit or different from your other experience. So how you make your idea work and how you convince people that your work will be for real. So that is the important part, right, for the second step. I wrote the first version for 2 months. The first time I tried, I got declined. And so I got this career proposal the second time. So that is second step. The third step will be you have to make sure the general audience understand your proposal. So you better send it out for some people, and some people will comment. Even if they are not in your field, they can comment whether they understand it or not. So sometimes the reviewer could be not in your area at all. So I have encountered people just in educational background. So they read your proposal, they really don't understand any of the techniques. So that's important that make sure everyone potentially be your reviewer understand it. So that will be my experience of these 3 steps. I got rejected the first time and the second time. I understand the third step didn't work. I didn't do the third step. I didn't ask people read my proposal. So the second year, I really asked a couple of people, give me feedback, say what is not clear, and then I improved it.
Thank you.
Let's see. For me, I've written several NSF proposals before submitting the career proposal. Some successful, some, like most of them, not successful. But the career, ever since I was in graduate school, I've been developing this idea, like my best idea, that this is going to be my career proposal. But to do that, I needed to get some preliminary data and sort of really think about this. And I didn't want to put in my first year or second year, or at the end of second year, I turned that in. But having that idea and make it big enough so that it's not just 5 years, but for your career, I think is important. I've solicited, I've talked to other people who were successful in their careers in biology and in engineering, and I was actually sitting in a career workshop last year. Like I was sitting over there, and like, several of them were here. So I went into all those things to get sort of try to figure out what it is that career wants. It's so I had all the proposals. I read it and tried to analyze how this thing was successful. And then I also had my colleagues several of my colleagues read the proposal, and then talk to read like education literature, trying to figure out what education thing has to go in. I wrote my proposal in 2 months, but I've been thinking about that for a long time. It's funny because the first proposal, the first draft was written like other NSF proposals that I've written in third person and very dry. And I decided that this is my proposal, so I changed everything to first person. So it's like I, me, my, and I started with my vision statement and all that. And I think that made it really personal. And then in the end, it really worked. It really reads well. And then it has good reviews. I guess the most important thing is to try to figure out what your passion is, what you're passionate about with research, and just try to sell that. And then there's a little bit of luck involved, I think. I was lucky because the usual division that I put in, which is the Division of Environmental Biology, I talked to the program officer, and that person said, your proposal doesn't fit to this directorate, so you have to go to this different one, which I've never submitted anything to that place before. But that panel, which is Integrative Organismal Biology organismal system panel, gives out less number of career awards, but the amount of the award was much higher, which seemed to me that they don't get as many career proposals as they would like to get, and I think that sort of helped me. So there's a little bit of luck involved as well. But I guess you sort of have to be passionate, like pray about it, and then it sort of works.
Okay.
Okay. So I did get my proposal the first time in, essentially, but it took me quite a while to actually prepare the proposal. I would say it took me about 18 months. what I did was I collected some previous proposals from other people, essentially. And I've learned quite a bit, actually, by reading those that were not funded, being able to identify why this was not funded. I also got some proposals from other universities where they had some success with the career. So, you kind of have to do your homework in terms of, what makes a winning proposal. I also, and this was an advice from colleagues, my senior colleagues at other universities and here as well, was to study the history of your particular field. So many times you get, when you review NSF proposals or any other proposals, you do have the literature review section, but it's so dry and limited. You kind of have to demonstrate that you have a perspective, overall perspective of what has happened throughout the history of this particular discipline or this particular area. So that really strengthened my literature review section, because I started out, in the 1700s, essentially. It's literally. I did plan for the research aspect quite a bit. It's a National Science Foundation, so it can't be all, engineering or applied. So you need to put in a little bit of basic science flavor into what you're going to achieve at the end of your career award, for example. For the reason why I took 18 months, because I had to demonstrate some results that shows that, hey, if I get this award, I can do this kind of demonstrative research. Education integration, I actually took a course here at UCF, it was a graduate 6,000 level course that I was teaching, and I sort of integrated such a way that I'm going to improve this with certain laboratories and whatnot. K through 12, I planned for 3. I was able to do 2, but it's okay. I guess at the end, the program manager said you did a great job of K through 12. ORC certainly is very helpful in terms of formulating your ideas, and particularly I think important when it comes to you shouldn't say this, or you should focus on this aspect, and so on and so forth. As far as a review is concerned, of course I did get the first time, so I don't really have that perspective, but I did have 2 excellent and 1 fair. And from what I was told 7 years later was that that particular aspect of a reviewer was that such a way that it's a controversy. Essentially, I had an idea and I had a hypothesis and I developed this theory and whatnot, but it was very controversial. And the program manager was actually kind enough, or I was lucky enough, so that he actually sent the review to a 4th person and got somewhat of a non-biased review. So I had actually 4 instead of 3. This is back in 2001, basically. So don't be afraid to sort of have a hypothesis that somebody may argue against strongly, passionately. You may actually have a better luck with that, because it will stir up some discussion among the panels, essentially. So those are some of the experience that I had.
For me, before I got to the writing process, I had to do a lot of thinking. Thinking through my idea, trying to connect my idea to my research focus and how it's going to situate it in the education literature. So although it took me 6 months to write it, I had been thinking about it probably another 6 months in terms of formulating my idea, thinking about what it is I wanted to do. After I had a clear idea in terms of what I wanted to do with my research, I did meet with Vidi, and we talked it through, because I had never heard of a career award in science education. It was like unknown to me. And when I read it, I was overwhelmed, because it seemed like this huge, huge proposal. How do you wrap your mind around it and make it intelligible, competitive? So I needed some outside voices to speak to me in terms of helping me to frame my ideas better. So after meeting with Vidi, I immediately started delving into the science education literature, and I formulated a very strong theoretical framing for us the theoretical framing in terms of how you're going to situate your research is extremely important. If you cannot connect the dots to the research you're doing to what has been done that is well published and well accepted in the field, they will figure you don't know what you're talking about. So I spent a lot of time reading the research. In fact, my references probably added up to about 3 pages, just the references. In the smallest type, I think they allow is 10 that you can put it in to get all of my references there to show that I had done my homework in terms of framing my research. As far as the writing was concerned, I did my writing in sections. First, I formulated the research component in terms of what I wanted to do with this career award. Then I situated it in my teaching. Because I already work with a lot of K-8 math and science teachers, we have a huge database of teachers that I have access to. So when I told them that I could get access to 300 teachers for a survey or they would respond, I could make that argument because a lot of them knew me personally. And sometimes teachers will respond if they know you. If they don't know you, sometimes they'll look at your email and delete. So they bought into the argument that I was making that I had access to this number of teachers and that I could collect that data. After I had thoroughly formed my theoretical framing and provided some preliminary data in terms of what I already knew about this group of teachers, and I wrote my sections very clearly with the objective, some preliminary data that I had, and then the outcome I expected to find out with my research. And I did that for each one of the bullets. And one of the reviews came back, they said that it was such an easy proposal to read. So readability is really important, that they can really read through your proposal and it makes sense to them. Like someone else has said, I got people who don't know anything at all about inquiry science teaching to read the proposal. I had people in social studies or English education or whatever field outside of mine to read it. And if they came back asking questions, well, what do you mean with this? Explain that. It meant it wasn't clear. So I redid sections based on that feedback that I got, which ended up being very important. Because 15 pages, from my perspective, is not a lot because I can be very wordy when I write. I took out all of the diagrams that I had and tied it into a narrative because the diagrams took up so much space. Because once you do a diagram, if you don't explain it and just show the arrows, you have to then assume that they can follow them. So I took the diagrams out. So I actually did my proposal over probably 5 to 10 times before I got it in a format that I thought was very clear, very concise, and communicated well what it is that I wanted them to get. But the actual writing, it took me six months, but I did a lot of the preliminary thinking in terms of what it is that I wanted to write and how I wanted to frame it.
Okay, so most of these folks up here got the career on their first try.
Oh, yeah, I did.
So I'm going to assert that what I have to say is the most useful because I tried and got declined, tried again with a totally different topic, got declined, and then tried the third time and then finally got it. I think that's more typical. I don't know. But part of the reason I got declined was initially is I didn't really know how to write a proposal. I knew how to write papers. And I think first and foremost, I was making the mistake of writing proposals in the way that we tend to write papers. And I had read other proposals, and I still review many proposals. And I still find many proposals are written in what I would call the bad format, the paper type format. A long 3-page homage to all the research that had been done before that by page 4 provides a context for what you're going to actually do. But I think that's actually a poor way to write a proposal. And it was not until I had spoken to another UCF faculty member, Dr. Hu, who's in nanoscience, and I saw the light. And I realized that, as Bobby said, you only have 15 pages, and there's all this stuff you got to cram into 15 pages. Education, your career plan, your research, how it fits into the past. How am I going to put all that into 15 pages? And ultimately, I think you have to make some serious choices. You just can't get it all in. But given two options, cite all the past literature and not say anything about what I plan to do, or put out your ideas and do a decent job of putting it in the context of the latest literature. Which do you think is going to be more successful? Turns out the latter is more successful, and so I guess it took 3 tries for me to figure that out. But if you look at my third attempt, it is radically different from my previous 2. And I went through the process of submitting the first thinking, my God, this is the best proposal ever. It's certainly going to get funded. And it did not, as I said. When I wrote the second one, I thought, my God, this is 100 times better than my first proposal. Okay, so you can see that the third proposal was an order of magnitude superior to the first. And I think the point is that you have to take a very long-term view of proposal writing and put career proposal writing as part of your normal proposal writing as well, and think about the process of each proposal making you better and better with your grantsmanship. And don't wait until you've got all your preliminary results and you're in your 4th year and now you're going to write that winner career. I think you need to start earlier than that. And you need to be putting out proposals. And one strong suggestion is that I've heard from many others, including program managers, is that you first put out a normal, non-career type proposal to put out your idea and get some feedback on it. And then the next year, write your career. That's another approach. I think that's helpful because it helps you develop your idea and your grantsmanship. All of the other things that were mentioned up here, I completely agree with, so I won't reiterate them, but I will end with the following. I think many people now are doing interdisciplinary work, as am I, and I struggle to find a home for this proposal. I called program managers in engineering, in material science, in chemistry, in physics, and they all suggested, oh, that sounds more like that guy's area. Oh, that sounds more like that guy's area. And I went in a loop, like a game of chutes and ladders, okay, and could not find a home. And finally, I realized it was a truly interdisciplinary proposal, and therein lies the problem. But I needed to find ways to articulate what I was doing that fit best in one home. So ultimately, I went to the web pages for NSF where the different programs are described, and I started literally picking out textbooks, say, from material science, which is not my home field. My group does materials work, but I'm a chemist. And I started trying to pick up some of the lingo and thinking about how I could articulate my plan using the language of that unit, that area that I thought it fit best in. Ultimately, I decided on materials, and it hit. It was definitely not a chemistry proposal in the end, though there was lots of chemistry involved. It was definitely not an optics proposal, though the materials we make have optical function and are made with a laser-based process. So it took me a long time to find that right formula for describing what I was doing in the language of one home department. And I think it didn't narrow the focus or change the hypotheses, but it made the narrative clearer, I think, for the audience. And then the last thing was I really made it very hypothesis-driven, and I threw my idea out as almost the first sentence without any kind of context. I'm going to make metallodielectric micro and nanoscale materials and study the structure-property relationship, blah, 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 jargon, which didn't make a lot of sense. But at least the answer was there. What are they going to do? And then the reviewer could say, okay, well, now tell me why. As opposed to the reverse, where you say why this area is important as you do in a paper, and then say what you're going to do. So I really flipped that paradigm, and I'd be happy to talk more about it if you need some more information on it. And then I'll give it to Saiful.
Well, I guess all the people have said everything, and and I think I'm just going to take a few points and here and there, and then tell a few other things. I think what Steve just said is that persistent effort, right? And he's a great example. Never giving up, right? No is not an answer. So he believed in his idea. He just turned around here and there and got it funded. I think this must be commended because this is how it is. I mean, you believe in your idea, you just work around here and there, you will find a home, you will get it funded. So please do not take no as an answer and sit back and say, okay, I don't fit. You will get funded. That persistent effort, I think, is important. The other thing I'm a little different in the view that Steve was saying. I'm a little bit more skeptic. I always think, oh, my proposal is not good enough. It's probably not going to get funded. Okay, so I knew about career proposal before coming to UCF, and I knew that when you get career proposal, people look at you and you envy and like you're a smart, smart kid and all this thing. So I was thinking, oh, maybe I'm not. I know I was smart, but I'm not that much smart. So, so I thought, I'm going to just put it aside here and there. But what happened is that as soon as I came here, there was pressure all over. Right. So even if I try to, go around, I can't find a way to hide. So I have to submit, right? So therefore, in no time, I realized that I can't play this game. I must submit. So then I started to realize, okay, since I have to submit, I need to submit a good proposal, right, as good as I can. And of course, I would know that it's not going to be good enough, but that's not an excuse not to submit because somebody is watching that you are not submitting. So therefore, I went and I did my homework, months ahead, because I knew this time, if I did not submit, I will be called. And so, I did my homework. I looked at everybody, all the other in my field, who else got career proposal. I looked at their website. I looked at their profile, how do they write, what they do, and what is there, what they publish, and stuff like that. I talked to a lot number of people, and I did submit proposal before in NSF, and they got turned down. Then I just back to the program manager. I wanted to come to NSF. I want to do the panel. I just hammered. Oh, please call me. I wanted to come to a panel. I want to come to a panel. And finally, they called me to a panel. And then just before I submit my career proposal, I think, 4 or 5 months ago, and that changed my whole different outlook of proposal writing, right? I knew at that point how a proposal need to be written and why was my proposal getting rejected. By the time I did not still submit my career proposal, and it's pressure, so I created my career proposal in 3 or 4 months. I still thought it's not going to be good enough. I submitted, and I got it. I submitted. I never looked at this proposal after I submitted in July because I knew maybe not. So I started doing something else. I wrote some other proposal subsequent to that. I think I submitted 3 other proposals subsequent to my career, including career, all of them funded. So that's the other thing. So I think persistent effort is important. The pressure is important. Even if you believe you are not ready, please submit because you could be one of me that always skeptic about things. I guess in terms of all the intellectual merits and the stuff that people say, I think it's very, very important. And, probably that's all I have to say. If you have questions, I will answer.
Okay, so the panel has given you very good thought processes. Number 1, think through your process very carefully before you start writing. Everybody said that. When you write succinctly and clearly, and this is not a paper, it's something different. So you need to understand the process. Start early and also submit early. You may think your proposal is not good enough, but you might get funded. So always take that chance. And the other thing I want to say is, NSF CAREER is one of the very few proposals where you submit, you get very good feedback, even if you don't get funded. That feedback is very, very useful because next time you submit a career proposal, the ground rules don't change much for the career proposal. In all other cases, it's very different. If you submit a regular proposal for a regular call, and you get back feedback, and they say something, you think you have adjusted everything, next time it may even be worse. So you can't bet on that. Whereas career panels are generally very well run, and the rules are pretty similar from year to year. So the earliest opportunity that you get, you should submit. That is my view of the career thing. The other thing is sometimes Only when you write, you will formulate things. If you say, I'm going to look for some more preliminary results, some more, you will never get to that point of refining your proposal. And the other thing that I suggest to people is, when you write your very first draft of the proposal, put a copy away. When you actually submit, after a couple of weeks, pull the very first copy that you have and the one that you submitted. You will understand a lot more about the entire process. This is very important for you to learn. And once you have learned that, even then, not all the proposals that you submit are going to get funded. That is a reality. You have to understand, you are at the top of your game, but everyone who is applying is also at the top of their game. So you are competing with those kinds of people. And as mentioned by Dr. Khondaker, if you have a good idea, even if you get rejected, if you are persistent, like Dr. Kuebler did, you will ultimately get funded. You have to have that faith and continue to work on that. Now I'm going to throw some of these barrier panel questions which have been asked by different panels, and I'll get the panel to respond to this. Which year of your academic year should you submit the career proposal? Let's start at the other end.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Just a corollary to what I said was that the thing that I was saying is that I thought, my proposal was not good enough, was my view. Of course it was good, right? But because of my skepticism, that's what it meant. But you don't get a proposal funded if it is not good, right? The panel reviews and things like that. But the thing that runs into you is that, oh, I'm not ready, I'm not ready. You know, like sometimes you have this fear, I'm not ready. So that's why I just made that point, was that you are actually ready. No. I submitted my career in the second year, end of my second year. So, and that was the first time, and that was the time I got it.
Do you want us to all respond?
Yeah.
I think a good strategy, and you'll hear many different viewpoints, is to do it in year 3, 4, and 5. If you decide in year 2 you're ready to go, or even year 1, go for it. You know, when you're ready, that's when you should do it. But the reality is you're going to arrive, you may have course prep, you got to get your lab going, it helps to have preliminary results. There is that wisdom in the strategy of putting out a normal NSF proposal, and then once you get some response, putting in a career. So I think all of those things work well with the plan to propose in your 3rd, 4th, and 5th year. There's sometimes a concern that if I get funded by NSF, then they won't fund me for a career. I don't think that's true at all. I've known plenty of people who've been funded by NSF 1 or 2 times, and then they also get a career. So I wouldn't worry so much about that. I also wouldn't try to partition ideas and say, well, I'm going to hold back my best idea for the career. And I think you should work on your best idea and put it in career if you want to apply in year 2, or put it in a normal solicitation. But put out your best ideas and develop them, and take the longer term view of it. You know, if you hit on a proposal, whether it's career or otherwise, that's great. So, be in the game to be funded with your best ideas so you can do your research.
For me, I submitted year 3, but I would say it depends on you. For example, if you did a postdoc for 2 or 3 years before you accepted a assistantship, you may have been really working on your career award that entire time. So when you get your real job, air quotes, you are in a different position than where I was in terms of being ready to submit. So if you were in that situation where you were actually doing the research that you're vested in during your postdoc years, and then you get your assistantship job and you have data that you're ready to move forward with, you may be ready to submit at the end of your 1st year. But for me, the beginning of my 3rd year worked for me. When I started in 2001, I was encouraged to submit that 1st year, and like I said, it scared me, so I wanted to go, is this really for me? What are you talking about? Because I was not there. I had my teaching that I had to do. was a new college, very different than the one that I was part of previously. Getting to know the teachers so that it will allow you to come into their classrooms. They have to develop a relationship with you so that they trust you. It was no way that I was ready to submit year one. But for me, year 3 worked well. And I did get funded the first time.
I would say second year. Definitely you need some prep time in terms of both writing and having some preliminary, I wouldn't say preliminary, it's a result that demonstrates that you can achieve certain outcomes. So probably second year.
So I submitted one at the end of my second year and got it. It was funded in the first round. I'll say when you're ready. And I wasn't ready in my first year. And I know people who like as they start their job, they submit, and I don't know. But for me, I had to. So there was. So I was a postdoc for 4 years before starting this job, and during a postdoc, I had an NSF grant. So I was finishing up that, and I had to generate some data and refine my thinking. So it took me about 2 years to figure that out and also get adjusted to, teaching and all this new changes. So I'll say second year, but I could have waited 1 more year because I bought a house in July and it was sort of ridiculous. But I decided to do it anyway.
You had to live.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
So I submitted the first time the second year, and I figured that the best chances will be the second year, third year, and the fourth year, because until the fifth year, I feel perhaps you have too much pressure because you still haven't got a career, some kind of thing. Maybe you don't have a good temper to write a good proposal. Yeah.
So you heard from them, the time is right when you are ready. That is the key. The second thing I would suggest is, very early you have to start thinking about it. And even if you're not going to submit, think as if you're going to submit. Then you will start collecting the data, and if you're not ready, don't submit. Don't make that decision a priori, upfront, saying, I'm not going to submit. Then that first year you will not do anything, if it's your first year. Or you say, I'm going to submit only in third year, second year you may not do anything. So act as if you are going to submit. And if you feel that you are not ready, nobody can force you to submit. So it might be worthwhile going through that process. The other question that comes up very often is, how important are preliminary results when submitting proposals? Do I have to have preliminary results? Or can I just write a story of how I'm going to get my preliminary results? That's an important question, especially in science and technology areas people ask. Can I ask you to explain what you did?
Okay. So I think the whole purpose is to prove that your idea works. So there's many ways to prove that your idea works. So one way of doing that is you have preliminary results. But that is not the only way, right? So you can have mathematical theory to prove that it works. So it really depends on your area. For me, I didn't have I have related work, but not directly related to the topic. But I think by literature search or kind of other ways to prove that it works, it will be equally effective.
For me, I think it's important to have preliminary data when everybody's experience is different. So I published a few papers on that topic so that I'm not new to that field. And I got an in-house grant and then used that money to generate some preliminary data, which meant that I went out using that money to catch some grasshoppers and did some experiment so that I can actually prove that, okay, I have the capacity to do this sort of experimental thing. I used my startup to generate some DNA data. not like full length, but just enough to show that this is something I can actually do. But then there are also a lot of things that I put it in the grant that I have no idea how I'm gonna do. Now that I have the grant, and I read my grant proposal again, I'm like, what was I thinking? Because I put in so much in there, I'm sort of freaked out about how I'm gonna actually do it. Because that means me learning a lot of new skills and trying to do completely different type of research. So in that sense, so I have no preliminary data, but just good ideas. I think that also sort of works. So you don't have to have a preliminary data for every single thing that you're gonna do, but enough to demonstrate that you're top of your game in terms of you're pretty clear on how you're gonna carry that out. I think that's important, just to demonstrate that you can do it.
Yeah. So again, saying the same thing, but you really need to demonstrate. So in my proposal, basically, I had two demonstrations. One was more of the theoretical side. So it involved mathematical analysis, but so that was what I would consider as a demonstrated results that's tied with sort of a controversial hypothesis. And the other was sort of an experimental, here is the result, kind of a demonstration that when you put it all together, and if you look at the type of proposed work and the tie to the intellectual merit, you've kind of sort of laid the foundation that says, hey, I can do this. So that's the message that I was trying to get across with having some demonstrated results.
I had preliminary data, and I did include it in my proposal. And I think that was a positive for me, as opposed to everything being brand new.
I had preliminary data and a paper and a journal cover, and I put the journal cover in and said, look, we can do it. I wanted there to be no doubt that we could do it.
Yeah, I had preliminary data. It's very important. I think if you are submitting first year, maybe you can get by without preliminary data because you just started. But if you are finishing your second year and you're submitting, I think everybody knows that university pays you a startup. You spend 2 years, and you have something to show for your money. If you have nothing to show for your money, how can somebody else trust you that you will show something for their money? Number one. If you are not submitting what you have been doing for the last 2 years, and then submitting something else, then that means what you have been doing, you are not believing in it. So there is a lot of things that comes in, right? So it comes in, and if you look at from the outside point of view and you see, okay, he spent 2 years, he got certain results here and there, or he may not have anything, and it gets complicated. So you want it to really start doing things that you believe in it, and use that one to say, okay, look, I have demonstrated the key idea that my idea is going to work, and that if you give me money, okay, university startup is going to finish, they give me a little bit of money, I bought the instrument, but if you give me the money, I'm going to use this and run for another 5 years, and that's going to create this phenomena, right? And I think that's important. And then if you wait more and more, then you need to show more for your time, because they wanted to see assistant professor, young faculty who they think is a bright star, that they were aggressive, and they had a lot of things compared to the time that they spent. So they had to become proportionate.
Again, these are all very good points. In most cases, you want to make the reviewer believe in what you do.
Right.
One of the ways convincing them is, I've done this preliminary results. Look what I've done in the last couple of years. This is where this new research can take me if you give me the money. So your story has to be convincing. And as Dr. Khondaker said, if you're submitting it in third year and don't show any preliminary results, there's always a question in somebody's mind, what did they do for 3 years? I mean, they just sat there and vegetated for 3 years, and they're now coming and asking me money? Why should I give you the money? That will be the normal question that they ask. So whenever possible, wherever possible, you should have preliminary results. If you are submitting the first year, you may not have. So you may have an excuse like that. But you still have to make your story believable. That is a key thing. And there are two parts, as you all know, to the career proposal. One is the research part. We've been talking about the research part. Now, the education part of the career proposal is very critical. Unlike any other proposal, you're going to spend a lot of time and effort in doing it. Let's start with the education person and ask Dr. Jeanpierre to give us some insight into what should be written in, what are they looking for when they look into your career portion, education portion of your career proposal.
For me, the education portion centered around my doctoral students. I wrote into my proposal that I would work with a historically black institution where they don't have a strong research wing to their science education doctoral program. And I would mentor 2 of those students, matching them with 2 of my students. And I actually wrote into the grant how I would teach them how to do qualitative and quantitative research using specific software. I was very explicit in terms of the processes that I would go through in terms of helping them to understand how to do both qualitative and quantitative analysis. I wrote into the grant funding for them to come to the University of Central Florida and be with me for an entire week and shadow me into the classrooms of my longitudinal case study teachers. And they worked directly with me, collecting data, interacting with my graduate students, coming back to the university, showing them how to use the software, giving them specific assignments that they had to produce to show that they understood how to use the software, how to analyze the data. I wrote into the grant money so that we could go to national conferences together and present as a team, and they demonstrated that they could do the qualitative and quantitative research that I was involved in. And I also wrote into the grant because the faculty of the students were not heavily invested in doing research, that I would actually provide a seminar for them where their students would present with me to them and teach them in terms of what we were doing. And they really liked that I wrote that strong diversity piece in there because they like a diversity piece, that you're reaching beyond your institution or you're including people who are traditionally not in high numbers in STEM fields. That goes over really well with NSF because they want to show, because you know it is a government organization, that they are all inclusive. So including that historically black institution in terms of their students and then a component for the faculty, I don't know if they had seen it written like that before. And they got to, like I say, work with my students. It just so happens that I had one African-American male and one white female, and both of the students from the historically black college, of course, were African-American students. So I had a diverse group when I went to the national conferences to present. And I actually tied it, of course, back to my research. It wasn't, that's the other thing. In talking to people who are in science and engineering, they often think about education component from my perspective as a sidebar, and a good reviewer can pick that up. So your challenge often is integrating the education component into your research so that it doesn't look like it's a bother. Are you with me? You want to show that it's an integral part. It's not going to be your main part because your main part will be your research, whatever it is. But I think getting the education part to fit is often more of a challenge for you if you look at it from the perspective, now I have to do the education component. Try to integrate your thinking as you're writing, it would be my suggestion.
Yeah, you can go.
Oh, okay. So when I was sort of in preparation, I really didn't have a good starting point for education. And by chance, I had a friend who worked at NASA Kennedy Space Center, and his son was severely visually impaired. And he asked me what I do. And I started to describe certain things, and I got stuck. I couldn't, because he didn't know some of these descriptive words, and he has no meaning to him. So that's where it kind of started. I had visually impaired programs for visually impaired kids. And you know, it started out in the proposal as a big program, but eventually at the end, I had one kid that I basically personally worked with. And he's actually a computer science major at UCF right now. But so that aspect was somewhat of a uniquely different than what other people did. And I wrote it such a way that, look, this kid is not going to be a material scientist, period, because of his visual impairment. But what, through this experience, it's going to make me a better educator. So that was sort of my theme of my education. Whatever that I was doing, you know, again, if you just kind of laundry list the whole thing, that's a red flag, immediate red flag. So I had, you know, programs for a bunch of local high school kids. I had programs for some UCF courses, but this particular program with the visual impaired kids, my main theme was all these activities integrated with the research is going to make me a better instructor, a better trainer, essentially, to the students, whether they're, you know, graduate students or fifth grade visually impaired children, essentially. So that was sort of my theme of my education.
For me, since it's still fresh in my mind and I have to figure out how am I going to actually do it. For me, it was sort of hard to come up with the educational component first, because, you know, everybody I talk to, I'll come up with something special, but, you know, all the special things have been already taken. And I had to come up with something special again. So it came sort of down to, okay, I need to cover K-12, undergraduate, graduate, and underrepresented students and all that. And then, you know, initially I wrote, you know, typical NSF style broader impact thing, and I was like, it's not gonna cut it. I don't like it. But then I started thinking, what can I do to help the needs of these different group of students for K-12? So I have you know, two girls, and one goes to kindergarten, and she's going to be in elementary school. And I was looking, yeah, what does elementary school lack here in Florida? FCAT, STEM education, right? And so I had you know, like service learning component in my entomology course that I teach, where I take students and really engage with the fifth graders using grasshopper as a, you know, little. I'm going to show them how to do experiment. So I actually had fun with it. Fun with the idea. I play with my daughter. This is gonna work, and it's sort of, yeah, she likes it. For undergraduate, our biology department have 2,500 students, majors. We have 16 faculty members. And what do these students get? They just go through the coursework, and they don't really get that intense biology experience. So I said, okay, I'm gonna create a field course for summer where I can actually train students, you know, in person, you know, like really hands-on research. What does UCF need? I work with a lot of transfer students who took advantage of the Direct Connect program, and I teach intro bio, and a lot of students struggle because they they are used to this small community college setting, and now they're in this large university with thousands of students, and they don't know what to do. And I had mentored a transfer student who's now a graduate student. So I asked him, would it be useful if I have some sort of mentoring program for transfer students? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. That's crucial because there's no mentoring structure on. So I sort of tried to identify the needs of different group of students at different level and say, what can I help? And also at the same time, it's just not just helping, but also integrate with my research. And I think that sort of played out well. The reviews on educational component were they're excellent. So, so in the end, it sort of made it my own unique thing, but I did not go for visually impaired because Dr. Sohn has already taken that thing, or somebody, or disabled kids. So I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna work with what I have, and if you make it relevant enough, I think it will work.
Right. So actually, I did all of the special things other person did, but I think this educational component of my proposal, actually I have to thank Vaidi a lot. One thing is that you have to cover every level. So that is what Vaidi told me. I think that is very important. You have to cover every level, like high school, the whole society. That's important. And I talked with Bobby, and I remember I remember a lot of, that's very important is that you have to show integration. It will not be your burden of doing education. That's what she told me. I think that really helps me. That's important. I didn't have anything that is very, very special, perhaps, I guess, but I cover every levels, and I pay attention to the integration of the education with the research.
I think for the education component, Vaidi was very, very helpful. So since Vaidi is here, when you write the proposal, I would recommend that you go and see him. He's full of ideas. I haven't done so too much special, but of course that's the demonstration of integration and things like that, So I knew Vaidi was there, so I relied on him, and then, Among the other things, I agree with everybody what they said, but there are a few other tricks that I followed. Since I was in panel reviews, I made a big list of why the proposals are getting rejected. As we review the things, I was writing notes as that why is this proposal getting rejected. So I will have short notes and so when I came back after a few reviews, I found out that I have like few pages, like a lot of bullet points why the proposal get rejected. And so I paid attention as I wrote. For example, in education category, I can tell you, it got rejected because NSF is big in education and diversity and minority involvement. Minority could mean women is minority in science, and of course, Hispanic and underrepresented groups are minority in science. And if proposal does not address it, although you wrote all the excellent things, it's going to be get out. So there are lots of reasons, or just not integrated enough, right? So there are people write proposal, excellent proposal otherwise, but just ignore NSF's basic, mechanism that what they want, and so you get rejected. Or if in research part, it get rejected, because you took, as Steve said, it was not coherent enough. We could not find what the guy is proposing up until 4th page, right? Is that this thing was not flowing, or there was no preliminary data, or there was no alternate. How do you know your thing is going to be successful? You did not have a alternative strategy. What if it fails? Have you thought about all those things? So I think if you talk to different people and make a list of points why your proposal could fail, and you pay attention to it, you will be good.
So I guess I want to pick up on a point that Bobby raised, which I guess I would say is, relates to forming a partnership with whatever groups you might engage for your outreach. Maybe it's teachers in the K through 12 system. I think for developing your idea, start that process early. If you think you want to work with teachers, go out to the teachers and say, what do you need? Because you may come up with a great idea, but it's not going to work ultimately, even if you do get funded, if it's not responsive to a need that the teachers, for instance, have. And who knows, you may go out and have a discussion and come back from that with a better idea than you started with, or some hybrid. And that process will be an important partnering effort. Right, exactly what UCF is all about. We want to be the #1 partnership institution. So what better way to do that than by first engaging the groups that you think you want to do outreach with. Also, start early. I haven't heard that mentioned. For instance, if you want to go into the school systems, you generally have to have, for any letters, for instance, you need to have support letters that say the teachers are going to work with you. You need to have those generally approved at the superintendent level, which takes time, of course. So this is not something you can put together, I would say, even in the last 2 months. It needs to be done far earlier. Lastly, I would say do a little bit of homework. For instance, how this relates to integration. In my outreach plan, we went into schools and we talked about our research, okay, what we were doing. And I tried to structure it as a peer-to-peer learning experience. So rather than me going in, gray-haired curmudgeon, talking about research, I had my students go in and talk to middle school students about how they were applying concepts from science. So it was more of a peer-to-peer learning experience. I decided to focus. I can't do everything. So I had a justification. I'll focus on the middle school level, 7th and 8th grade, because I'd read somewhere, and I guess I believed that's a time when, for instance, women will often make a decision whether or not to go into STEM careers or to put it aside. So I thought, okay, that's a good target area then for us to potentially have an influence. And then I read the Sunshine State standards. I found, for instance, that I think at the 7th grade level, matter and energy is a very important concept. How do they relate? And I said, well, we do matter, we do energy. I can focus our presentations to help reinforce the teacher's curriculum as it applies to the Sunshine State standards. And I had a little diagram that showed how there'd be a one-to-one connection. So that helped, I guess that helped me be responsive to teachers' needs, and it was integrated, and my spin, if anything, my uniqueness was that rather than me talking about our research, I had the students do it, and hopefully that was a more receptive spokesperson for how science gets applied. So that was my approach overall.
Thank you. So in the career proposal, unlike other proposals, NSF is looking at you as a researcher and as an educator, but not in separate parts. These parts are combined. So integration of research and education is very important. If you start thinking of it very early that way, you will automatically come up with where you can put the integration. If you think of the research component separately and then the education component, then integrating it might be very difficult. The first thing before I open the floor for questions is first to thank our panel for sharing their wonderful views with you, because I want all of you to be successful, and they have already started the process for you. Thank you very much. Now I want to open the floor for questions. Any questions that you have for the panel? Meanwhile, Dr. Blair will distribute the evaluation papers. I don't want you to leave without filling out those papers. Meanwhile, ask questions. That is why these people are here.
Can someone tell us a little bit about contacting program managers? Can some of you comment on the idea of contacting program managers and how important this thing is? Is it something essential or not? And what's the approach? What's the right approach to go about it?
Yes, it is important that, I mean, in general, when you're putting in an NSF grant, I always contact program manager, whether it's career or not. But it was particularly important for me to figure out if my proposal was a right fit for the program. And then the program manager was kind enough to talk to me on the phone to suggest other names in different division who I didn't know, and so I contacted them, and they're all excited about the idea, and then also sort of maintain contact afterwards. I do that too, and for a program that a project that was rejected, I sort of try to keep up to date so that, you know, I don't know how much power a program officer has, but I just want to, you know, if it helps a little bit, I want that. So I try to be cordial. The way I do it, I email first, and their job is to talk to you. So, and then they'll say, when is a good time? And I'll just call and talk. Initially, I was really nervous about talking to program officer, but then I had friends who became program officers, and I know who they are. So eventually, I figured, yeah, they're the same people, and they're not any different. So it became very comfortable later.
Yeah. You have a comment?
Yeah. So since I will be leaving, I'll take this and then.
Sure.
So I would say take every opportunity to go to the NSF and talk. So since, as I said, I went to panel reviews, so I used that opportunity. I was prepared, and you know, I was bombarding all the program managers for an opportunity to come. So since I was there already for 2 days, I took my package. I talked to, you know, all of whoever I found. I showed them what I'm trying to do. I read them and see what they say. You know, try to feel the body language, what they ask me question, and how excited they feel about things. And sometimes you don't know. I mean, they're going to can give you very good advice. And some of them say, yeah, okay, submit. So you will have a feel factor. But I would say every opportunity that you have, you wanted to talk. You wanted to talk to the program manager and find out. Because the worst thing that could happen is somebody say, yeah, I don't have time, I'm busy, or just give you a cold shoulder. Yeah, okay, why not you submit? But still, you know, you may end up getting a good fit and experience. So it's always very, very helpful.
Dr. Sohn.
So I had a very different experience. Program managers are people. Some managers will love to talk to you and engage in discussion, technical aspects, educational aspects. Some managers do not want to be bothered, particularly regarding career proposal. They feel that the career proposal has to sort of be a sacred, you know, type of a proposal, essentially. So I'm not saying you should not contact. What I did was actually found out about the personality of this person through another contact, essentially. And I found out that this person, you know, is a very sort of a traditionalist in terms of you write the proposal, that's it. You know, no need to talk about what you have to say, what you have to enforce, essentially. The proposal has to stand on its own. So that was a type of person that I had to deal with. And I chose not to contact this person. The only time I contacted this person was after I submitted my proposal. I've sent him a nice email saying, I've submitted the proposal. If you have any questions, please let me know. And that was it. But I understand I'm probably 1 out of 100 that never contacted the program manager before. So you probably want to find out a little bit about who this person is and how he or she operates.
It's a good idea if you can find out. But one thing I want to tell you, just because you talk to your program manager does not mean that your proposal will get funded. The proposal has to go through certain gates without which you will not get there. But some program managers are very good to look at and say, this concept doesn't fit me, or there is some gap in this, can you do that? Not all of them will give you that kind of feedback. It depends on the individuals. These are personality traits, we cannot change them. But if you get a chance to go to panel reviews, please do. Because there you will see the interaction of how it is done, why proposals are rejected, why they are accepted. For that reason alone, it's worthwhile going.
And then the panel, during the panel, you really better impress that person.
Yeah.
I
have a question. So in that point, when is the best time to volunteer yourself to go to the panel, to review panel? How do you do that? And to review the panels is only for the subdivisions, yes? It's not for NSF CAREER, yes? Oh, it is also.
Oh,
Can
yeah,
you be?
for every proposal.
Okay, good. So how we get into this review panel? And
Now.
when is the best? So, okay.
Why are you
How
waiting
do
for
we
that?
do?
Well, you
You
can
don't
sign
want to
up.
wait.
You can sign up online and
Yeah.
get yourself registered in the database. But I
Right.
think it's also helpful to call program managers,
And
And
say
say
you
I'm
want-
available.
with a
Yeah.
combined and say, hey, I've never served on a panel. I think I need this experience. I'd like to volunteer my time. Here's my areas of expertise. If you happen to have a reasonable question for that program manager about your own proposals, that's a good time to pitch it as well.
Yeah.
But I think it's helpful to do both, to get on the database, but also call them and say,
Call, yeah.
So they choose exam criteria or they just take you?
Oh, no, they look at, no.
In most cases, they need people, as long as your expertise fits their panel. In most cases, they will call you and say, yes, we want you.
right.
So I'm going on a panel this April, April 10th to 12th, and so I know the program officer at a personal level, and I was sort of interesting. So if you have that sort of relationship, it's like one person sort of dropped out at the last minute, and he called me up and said, "Can
Yeah.
you make it up?" And it's like he said, "I'm gonna give you like cookies and things like that." So I said, "Sure." And then it was actually, so I said yes, and then they gave me, all these detailed information. But before that, I indicated to the program officer that I'm very interested in
Yeah.
serving on a panel.
Exactly.
And then that, when there was a, sudden dropout of one panelist, he thought
He
of
remembered,
me
yeah.
because I told him that I wanted to be on a panel.
Yeah, and NSF pays for your travel, your stay, and also a consulting fee for the days that you spend. So you don't spend any money from your pocket.
One thing that I've heard that NSF looks a lot at your CV at the time that you're submitting a proposal. How strong were your CVs in terms of publication at the time that you submitted?
Okay, I'm sorry. He needs to ask the question to the microphone.
So yeah, I'll repeat the question.
So you can be recorded.
Okay. So one thing that NSF is looking at is the strength of the CV in terms of publication. So how strong were your CVs when you submitted your proposal?
So NSF has a 2-page bio sketch, which is a pretty standard format. It has 5 relevant publications and 5 other. I don't know if reviewers look at your actual CV, go online and find it. But I think when I'm reviewing a proposal, I look them up. So that sort of, even if that bio sketch is not there, I look them up. So I don't know how that answers. But actual document that you're submitting is just 2-page thing.
For me, it was different. They looked at the connection between what I had published and what I was proposing. If I seen from the reviews, they said that the publications were not as extensive because I don't think I had 10 at that time. Because remember, you are an assistant professor. You're not at associate or professor level yet. So you're still in your developmental years, and I think most reviewers look at it from that perspective. So for me, they looked at the connection between what I had published and what I'm proposing as my research. Did they see any links in terms of me building my knowledge in terms of what it is that I say that I'm going to do? So I wasn't scattered doing this, that. Everything I had published had a connection back to what I was proposing. And you were asking the question earlier about selection for reviews. I wanted to go back to that. I actually met several NSF officers at different conferences, and I would go up and introduce myself to them. And I actually would say I'm interested in doing reviews. And I was called upon to go and do a review, and you need to do it really well. For us in education, the ones we review are usually extremely time-consuming. You need to write your reviews and submit them before you actually go to the panel. They need to be thoughtful, not little bullet points that say mundane things. You need to say something substantive. So you don't want to just go and review and then you like bomb out in terms of your performance, because they are looking at you. And then when you come together as a group and you're exchanging ideas, it's easy to pick up if you've read it. I'm a teacher. I can tell if you've read. So it's easy for them to pick up if you've read it and then if you know what you're talking about. So reviewing is very important. It does help you in terms of your thinking. It helps build your understanding of how to write a good proposal. But it's extremely time-consuming, and you need to do a really good job when you do it. And I'm consistently called back to do reviews. So I would assume that they're at least accepting the job that I've done in the past. In fact, last year I had to turn 2 calls down because I was overextending myself. Because for me, I take the time to read every last page of the proposal, go to the appendices and look at those things and write a thorough review. And if you don't do that, you're likely not to be called upon to do it again. But it is a good experience, and I would definitely recommend that you do it, but you need to do it well when you do it.
So going back to the CV, you were obviously hired as an assistant professor at UCF, which means you have a pretty strong CV. I would also recommend that, everybody kind of said, well, second year or third year, you should submit the career proposal with some demonstrated results. There are probably low-hanging fruits. Career is pretty competitive, so there are probably low-hanging fruits of funding sources that you can go to, and even bulk up a little bit of your current and pending as well. So that's another demonstration piece that you can throw in.
But 10 is the required in terms of the biographical sketch. And some people will not go and pull up your CV. So I would suggest that you have a strong, biographical sketch that connects to your research, that shows that you're actually vested in this. It's just not something you thought of last night and threw together to try to get a career award.
So actually, I remember I asked the same question when I go to the panel and ask the PM the first time, say, okay, I don't know whether my CV is strong enough. So the PM said it doesn't matter much. I think it depends on area, but that is he told me. Yeah.
Okay, back to the current and pending comment. So maybe a good way for me to judge this, if you can just give a number, and you're a reviewer, how many pending proposals would you expect to see for related work to your NSF career?
So when I served on the panel, I don't want to see a blank.
How many would you want to see, minimum?
Something. Meaning that this
More
is
than
not
one.
the first proposal you're writing. Yeah. Even if you have current something, let's say you have a current program from DOE, that kind of validates your credential even further, I think.
I don't think they're looking for the numbers.
Yeah.
This is a demonstration of the fact that you've written a proposal, you've convinced somebody to give you money, and you're doing the work.
Right.
It is not 18 proposals I've gotten funded. That's not what they're looking for.
So everybody
if you
says
have
at
convinced
least
somebody,
one?
But I want to tell you, at UCF, I worked with people. Their very first proposal they ever wrote was their NSF career proposal. They had 0 other proposals, and they've gotten funded.
How long were
So
they here?
Very first attempt, I can tell you, I can give you names of people. Very first proposal they wrote was the NSF career proposal, and they've gotten funded. So,
Okay, you can get funded from other places other than NSF.
Yeah.
It's not the only institution that funds. I didn't have any NSF proposals that were funded. Probably had written somewhere around 5 NSF grants before I got the career award, but I had funding from other sources. So I show that I am fundable in terms of my ideas. So I think that's not a high thing in terms of whether or not you get a career award from my perspective and from what I went through in terms of how many proposals you already have.
So for the NSF career, you have the pending one, but you will have some rejected one. So how you also put that one?
No,
how that works?
you only put those that are funded or those that are currently under review.
Not rejected yet.
So
Yeah, those that are under review.
No, my point was I got
current
rejected.
is good. Current is good, right?
My point was I got rejected about 4 or 5 times before I got funded. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. It wasn't my first attempt for me. I know some, it may have been their first attempt. It wasn't my first attempt.
And this is totally personal, but if you have 18 pending, I would kind of doubt that to a certain extent, actually. Yeah. There's, there is that sweet number of certain number in your field. It may be a little different. Yeah. More than 0 is a good number. Yeah.
One more question. Let's have one more question. Then we can let the panelists go and eat.
One more point on that. If you had that many grants, you may be perceived as being overextended in terms of your work there. Where will you find the time to do a really good job with your career award unless you are really good at showing that integration? Because oftentimes your proposals may be on different segments of different things and different ideas. So I'm not sure if that would be a strong positive if you had that number of grants and then gone up for a career award, which is a career. Okay, the title should tell it to you in terms of the massiveness of the work that you'll probably be doing for this particular proposal. So unless you have a lot of doctoral students who are doing a lot of your work.
Yes. So in that point also, so you have the NSF career, and you send another subdivisions, NSF. So all of them should have some connection to your NSF career. That is a good point, yes. You cannot do it just something that is very different, that will look bad.
I would think so. If you can show how it's all integrated, I think that would be a strong point for you.
I just wanted to make one comment. I mentioned I was working alongside Vaidi in ORC this year, so I'll put on my ORC hat. Let me remind everyone to be very, very careful. Make sure that your writing in your proposal is truly original. No cut and paste. Remember, most of us have learned that, but there are some differences in how we are trained, whether we're implicitly or explicitly trained about the rules of plagiarism and even self-plagiarism. So let me start with self-plagiarism. Sometimes people get confused with that. It is absolutely not acceptable to copy words, sentences, paragraphs from your own papers and stick it in your proposal, even though they're your own words. That is self-plagiarism. If you have more than about a sentence that you are citing from someone else's work, it is not acceptable to only put a reference at the end. You need to put it in quotes and set it off separately. If you have a figure that you want to borrow from someone else's work to maybe illustrate something, that's appropriate, but make sure you cite it in the figure caption itself. If you're uncertain about some of these rules, go to the MLA handbook, for example, and read about what makes up plagiarism. It's not just borrowing someone's words. It can be passing off someone else's ideas as your own. So if your idea is that you're going to make little gold nanoparticles and use them to treat cancer, well, if that's been done by someone else, although you've not copied someone else's words, you have passed off their idea, and that is plagiarism. We have in ORC now the iAuthenticate tool, which will check text, and some people have, I guess, balked at using it, but it really is your friend because it will help you catch examples of cut and paste that may not be your own fault. It is not uncommon for people to work on proposals with others. Even with the career, you might ask a student, for example, to help develop some content. If that student, let's not focus on the student doing the wrong thing, but if they were to cut and paste, you'd really hate for that to impact your career, right? So make sure that you run your proposal through iAuthenticate and make sure that you are aware of what plagiarism and self-plagiarism means and keep your work 110% above board. It's extremely important.
This is a very, very critical problem.
iAuthenticate is required,
You definitely put it through iAuthenticate and make sure that if there are areas that you are able to explain it or cite it properly. If you don't, you will be in trouble. Not only will you be in trouble, we will also be in trouble for sending the proposal out. So therefore, be very, very careful.
Yeah, and note that NSF and NIH and some of the agencies, they do run proposals
Yes.
through iAuthenticate anyway. You will be caught.
Yes.
I have found examples of plagiarism in the course of a review, not because I put the proposal through iAuthenticate, but I just saw a term that I hadn't come across before, and then I went and Googled it, and then I started finding text that was a wholesale cut and paste.
Yeah.
It's remarkably easy to get caught. So
Yeah.
it's not even worth thinking about.
Yeah, be very, very careful. So if you don't have any other questions, let's thank the panel one more time. And I hope you all write your NSF career proposals and win it. Thank you very much for coming.